Hey everyone, welcome back to Inside Indiana Overtime. I'm Alex McCarthy from Inside Indiana, talking about Indiana's Big Ten opener against Illinois. Indiana lost 83 to 80 in overtime to Illinois in Champaign today, which obviously is not where I am. I'm back home in Michigan, back home with signed Beatles memorabilia and whatnot, and home cooked meals. So things are good here. Things were not always so good in Champaign for Indiana today. Really streaky game. I mean, there would be back and forth, where Illinois would go on like an 11-3 run, then IU would answer with a 9-0 run, and just like stuff like that all day. I think there were 17 ties, somewhere in that vicinity of lead changes. I mean, it was constantly back and forth, back and forth. It felt a little bit, excuse me, a little bit like the IU Notre Dame game, where Indiana and Notre Dame were always within 4 or 5 points at the most, and they just kind of kept going back and forth, back and forth. But the difference here was that Indiana did take the lead a couple times. They once led by 7 in the second half and kind of let it slip away a little bit late and went to overtime. And Illinois kind of, it ended up being a 3-point game, but Illinois really should have won by probably a couple more, just because Yogi Ferrell hits this running fadeaway 3-pointer, which was the only field goal in overtime and was the only field goal in the last 11 and a half minutes. More than 11 and a half minutes of the game. So that was, I mean, obviously that's kind of the problem there is that Indiana was late. Indiana was turning it over so much that they hardly even shot the ball. They had 2 shot attempts after Yogi Ferrell hit a 3-pointer with 6:44 left in the game. 2 shot attempts before overtime, which is that's not how you run an offense. Usually you have to shoot. But they were turning the ball over. They, to their credit, obviously they were drawing fouls. They drew enough to keep up with Illinois, get to overtime, and stay in the game until the last possession of the game. Obviously, with it being a 3-point game, but at some point you have to, free throws are kind of meant to be a complement to how you're shooting the ball. I mean, obviously, and Indiana just really couldn't get shots off late in regulation. They were just 1 for 8. In overtime, so really even when they did get shots late, they had a hard time getting them to go down. And like I said, the one shot that they made in the last almost 12 minutes of play was that fadeaway running 3-pointer that Yogi Ferrell hit with 3 seconds left in the game. But for the most part, Indiana was really good from around the perimeter shooting the ball. They made 10 3-pointers, which is a season high. They were 10 for 22. As a couple people have said on Twitter, you're not going to shoot. And that's 45%. You're not going to shoot 45% every game for Indiana. And to shoot 45% from around the arc, to make 80% of your free throws, to out-rebound your opponent by 12. In the Big Ten, you've got to win that game. I mean, it's something where you have so many opportunities, you outplay them in so many categories, and you just still can't quite get over that hump, can't quite beat them. And in Indiana, I mean, it stemmed from the same thing that's happened with Indiana the past 3, really the whole season, is that they just turn the ball over like crazy. They had a season high 23 turnovers today, and that was in an overtime game, where they still I think had 20 or 21 going into overtime. So they've had more than 60 turnovers in the past 3 games combined. Which again, when you're playing Kennesaw State, when you're playing Nicholls State, you can get away with that and still win by 15 or 20. When you're playing Illinois, when you're playing any Big Ten team, you can't get away with that because they'll make you pay. Even if Illinois scores on half of those possessions that you're giving away, that's still at least 24, 25 points that you're giving them on turnovers where there's that swing. And especially in a close game like this, I mean, little things like traveling, like a lane violation, like getting the ball just knocked away from you, making a stupid pass or a misguided pass. That kills you in an overtime game that you lose by 3 points. If Stan Robinson maybe doesn't travel, if Troy Williams maybe doesn't travel, if Yogi Ferrell doesn't throw the ball away a couple times, then maybe we're talking about an Indiana win to start Big Ten play. But obviously we're here talking about a loss. But evenly matched throughout. I mean, we talked a little bit about Yogi Ferrell, but he had a huge game, career high 30 points, 9 for 15 from the floor. He hit 5 3-pointers throughout the game, including a couple big ones. The one he hit with 6:44 left gave Indiana a lead. The one he hit, obviously, in overtime got Indiana back within a possession because I think they were down 4 at that point. And then Rayvonte Rice, who was kind of the star of the game, got fouled, made both of his free throws to put Illinois up 3. Kind of an interesting play that Indiana drew up on the inbounds on that last possession where there was a heave to Troy Williams, who quickly dished it to Ferrell, who just couldn't handle the pass, and it looked like he might have gotten a pretty decent shot off, but unfortunately for Indiana that didn't really happen. But yeah, Rayvonte Rice, who's kind of been the go-to scorer for Illinois this season. He's a transfer. He's a junior guard. He's scored at least 12 points in every game. He scored 28 in the last game against Illinois Chicago, and he scored 29 today against Indiana. That's his Illinois career high, and it matches his full career high. So he had a huge game, and there are a couple of players who on Illinois who made a couple of big plays late. Nana Egwu played well defensively at times, even though he really he threw away a lot of Illinois possessions trying to shoot three-pointers, which really is not his game. But it was Indiana's game tonight, which was strange. I mean, they outshot Illinois by quite a bit. Indiana made 10 three-pointers. Illinois only made 2 on 17 attempts. Not great. That's a 12% shooting percentage. And so, like I said earlier, if you can't capitalize on that kind of a huge advantage, if you can't, and Indiana out-rebounded them by 12, if you can't capitalize on things like that, if you can't capitalize on a 30-point night from Yogi Ferrell, and a monster first half from Noah Vonleh on both ends of the court, then I mean, it comes down to ball security. I mean, it comes from not throwing away possessions. They had 5 turnovers in the last 6 minutes of regulation, and like I said, only 2 field goal attempts, which late in the game is exactly the opposite of what you want to do. You want to hold the ball, especially when you have a lead. You want to be able to set up your offense, and that's kind of something that a lot of IU fans have been concerned about, is the half-court offense. The past couple seasons is the half-court offense for Indiana, where you get Indiana in transition, and they really can play with basically anyone in the country the past couple years. But if you slow them down, like we saw tonight late, Illinois slowed them down quite a bit, forced them to play in the half-court, and they were just turning the ball over like crazy. It was one of those halftime things where John Gross's squad wanted to slow down Indiana, to slow down especially Yogi Ferrell. And though Ferrell hit some huge shots in the second half, he still didn't have an assist and turned the ball over 5 times in the second half. So in that sense, you kind of got what you wanted, where you know that he's going to get his points, he's going to get his shots. But if you can make him hand away a couple of possessions, then you're still kind of even with Indiana in that sense. So it's we've kind of been waiting for Indiana to figure out the turnover problem all season through these first 14 games, and it seems to only be getting worse in a really strange way. I mean, there were plays today. I mentioned a couple of the traveling. There's a lane violation, just kind of elementary things like that. There were, I think, 3 turnovers on inbounds passes where they either threw it to Illinois, or they couldn't inbound the ball. There was one time when Austin Etherington was trying to inbound it. I think Jeremy Hollowell threw a ball away. I mean, just simple things where it seems like if you're a college team, if you're a sophomore or junior on a collegiate team, you should be able to inbound the ball and to kind of keep track of the ball. So it was just kind of strange to see that, from a collegiate Big Ten program, especially 14 games into the season. So we'll see if Indiana figures that out. And even if they do, they have a really, really tough test later in the week against Michigan State. Even though it's at home, it's still Michigan State. They're still one of the best teams in the country. And so that'll be a really interesting game to see. I think it's Saturday at 2 at Assembly Hall. And then they play Penn State on the road, I think the 9th, something like that. So it gets a little bit easier after Michigan State, but still, I mean, if you're turning the ball over 20 times a game, you're giving anybody a shot at staying in the game with you and beating you. So we'll see if Indiana limits that. We'll see if the three-point shooting that went so well tonight can continue in the future. If it can, that's enormous for IU. Noah Vonleh hit 2 3-pointers tonight. If he can add that to his game, then he becomes not only the best freshman in the Big Ten, but really one of the best players. If he can stay out of foul trouble and hit those threes. But we'll see what happens. I am not going to be at Assembly Hall on Saturday for the game. But we'll be bringing you full coverage. I think Ed's going to be there. Robbie might be. I haven't talked to him about it. We'll see about that. But keep with us. Enjoy your New Year's. Enjoy what's left of 2013. The 5 hours left of 2013, and I will talk to you next year. I'm Alex McCarthy with Inside Indiana, and thanks again for watching Inside Indiana Overtime.